The whispering walls of Chichen Itza, the Mayan pyramid that seems to speak back, defying all known acoustic logic. It begins as a whisper in the jungle. The ancient city of Chichen Itza, once the beating heart of the Maya civilization, lies beneath the sweltering Yucatan sun. Tourists stand before El Castillo, the temple of Kukulkan, its massive limestone steps rising toward the sky like a stairway for gods. Then, someone claps their hands. A moment later, the pyramid answers back. From the stone steps comes a high-pitched echo, like the cry of a bird, sharper, quicker, and eerily alive. Modern science later identified the sound as an uncanny mimicry of the quetzal, a sacred bird in Mayan mythology believed to carry messages between worlds. Somehow, this 1,000-year-old pyramid doesn't just reflect sound, it transforms it. The structure speaks. The phenomenon isn't limited to one corner or one stone. Across the broad plaza, any sharp noise, clapping, footsteps, even whispers, bounces back as an intelligent echo. The steps, it seems, were carved to respond. Acoustic engineers from Mexico's Institute of Anthropology studied the effect in the 1990s, trying to replicate it with digital models. They discovered that each terrace of the pyramid produces a fractional delay in sound reflection, like a stone xylophone. The resulting harmonics merge into a single distinct chirp, the quetzal's call. Yet even today, no one can fully explain why it was built this way. Was it deliberate engineering, or an accident of geometry and weathering? Some archaeologists insist the builders had acoustic mastery, using sound as ritual, echoes as divine replies from the serpent god Kukulkan. Others argue it's coincidence, a perfect fluke of design. But then, how does one explain the precision? Each stairway on El Castillo produces a slightly different tone, like musical scales hidden in limestone. The deeper mystery is that this sound design isn't unique to Chichen Itza. Similar effects occur at other Mayan and Aztec temples, though never as pronounced. At Tikal and Palenque, whispers bounce down corridors as if the stones themselves conspire to communicate. It's as if ancient builders sculpted their temples not just to house gods, but to contain voices. Fringe theorists, of course, took it further. They claimed the acoustic design was meant for communication with entities unseen, spirits or gods answering through echo. Some said the pyramid listens to the living and speaks back the language of the dead. When explorers in the 1930s clapped in front of the pyramid at night, they swore they heard something different, not a bird, but a tone, like metal scraping within the stone. They refused to repeat it. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed those accounts as imagination. But even today, visitors report chills when the echo returns. It feels too alive. Too knowing. And no modern reconstruction has ever replicated it precisely. The ancient stones, somehow, do what our best microphones cannot. Scholars still debate whether the sound was a ritual illusion, a happy accident, or evidence of lost science, knowledge of waveforms, vibration, and resonance centuries ahead of its time. Whatever the answer, one truth remains: the Maya turned architecture into a voice. When the sun dips low over Chichen Itza and the plaza falls quiet, that voice still waits. A single clap, one breath of air, and the serpent god Kukulkan seems to whisper back through 1,000 years of silence. The pyramid listens. And sometimes, it answers. The screaming mummies of Thebes, bodies twisted in agony, their mouths frozen open, leaving archaeologists questioning ritual or terror. In the heart of ancient Thebes, within the Valley of the Kings, there lies a tomb unlike any other. Most royal mummies were interred with serenity, arms crossed, faces composed in peaceful repose, prepared to meet eternity with dignity. But among them, one figure breaks the silence. His body is arched, his mouth gaping wide in a silent scream. For over a century, he has been known only as the Screaming Mummy. When archaeologists first uncovered him in 1881, wrapped in hastily tied linen soaked in resin, they recoiled. The face was contorted in anguish, teeth bared, eyes wide beneath shriveled lids. It looked not like a man at rest, but one trapped between death and nightmare. Some even refused to examine him at night, believing he had died mid-curse. The mummy was catalogued as unknown man-e. But later studies suggested he may have been Prince Pentawere, the disgraced son of Pharaoh Ramses III, implicated in a failed coup to assassinate his own father. The so-called harem conspiracy. The punishment was said to be suffocation or forced suicide. The physical evidence supports it: twisted limbs, dislocated neck, and lack of ritual embalming, all signs of a death without sanctity. But then there's the question that chills every researcher who's stood before him: why is his mouth open? At first, scholars thought it was rigor mortis. Later examinations disproved that. His jaw was intentionally left unbound, unlike every other mummy whose mouth was tied shut after the opening of the mouth ceremony, a ritual meant to restore breath in the afterlife. Pentaware's mouth, however, was left permanently open, as if gasping for one more scream. Modern forensic imaging revealed something stranger. His stomach still contains traces of poison, perhaps he was forced to drink it. But his posture, bent backward, suggests suffocation, not peaceful poisoning. Some speculate he was buried alive in disgrace, mummified by his killers while he still struggled. Others believe priests left his mouth open as a mark of damnation, a soul never to rest, forever calling in silence. Even more unsettling are the others. Archaeologists have since found at least 6 mummies across Egypt with similar, screaming, visages. One from the late 18th dynasty, another from Deir el-Bahri, each body stiff, mouths agape. Coincidence? Or a forbidden class of burial reserved for those heard by the underworld? In 2018, new DNA sequencing confirmed that Screaming Mummy was indeed related to Ramses III. It fit perfectly into the tale of the cursed prince who conspired, failed, and died dishonored. Yet even with the name, the fear remains. For his body was never ritually purified, never blessed. Instead, it was sealed in goat skin, an unclean covering meant to bar entry into paradise. Even in death, his scream was a warning: betray the divine order, and eternity will answer. Scholars still debate whether the gaping mouth is evidence of pain, punishment, or spiritual banishment. Was he buried mid-cry, or sculpted that way by those who hated him? No one can say. But when visitors enter the Cairo Museum and look into his hollow sockets, something primal stirs, the human instinct that recognizes terror frozen in time. Across millennia, he still seems to be calling. Not for mercy. Not for redemption. But perhaps, for release. And if sound could ever escape mummified lips, the Valley of the Kings would never know silence again. The Antikythera mechanism's impossible mind, a 2,000-year-old Greek machine so advanced it shouldn't exist. In 1901, a group of sponge divers exploring the Aegean near the tiny island of Antikythera stumbled upon the shattered remains of a Roman shipwreck. Amid amphorae, bronze statues, and corroded treasure, they found what appeared to be nothing more than a lump of oxidized metal fused to rock. It looked worthless, until someone noticed faint, perfect gear teeth hidden in the corrosion. When archaeologists pried it open years later, they discovered something that defied every timeline of ancient technology: the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old analog computer. It was intricate beyond reason. A labyrinth of bronze gears, dials, and inscriptions, all built with mathematical precision on par with a modern clock. Once reconstructed, it revealed its function: to track the motions of the sun, moon, and planets, predict eclipses, and even display the timing of ancient Olympic games. A calendar, an observatory, a prophecy machine, all in one. How could such sophistication exist in the 1st century BCE, when Europe was still forging swords by hand? Historians were stunned. It was as if someone had torn a page from the Renaissance and dropped it into antiquity. The device contains 37 interlocking gears, some with teeth so finely cut they could only have been made by expert metalworkers using precision tools unknown at the time. Its craftsmanship rivals 18th century engineering. Yet the Greeks of that era, Aristarchus, Hipparchus, Archimedes, were supposed to be centuries from developing such technology. And yet, there it was, pulled from the sea. Scholars traced its mathematical foundation to the island of Rhodes, home to a school of astronomy under Hipparchus, the genius who mapped the stars with unheard-of accuracy. Some believe the mechanism was his lost work, a culmination of centuries of astronomical wisdom. Others whisper a stranger possibility, that it was built from knowledge inherited, not discovered. Fringe theorists call it a memory of Atlantis, evidence of a vanished civilization whose scientific mastery predated Greece. More conservative voices suggest it was the work of one unparalleled craftsman, a single mind centuries ahead of his age, perhaps a forgotten student of Archimedes himself. But whoever built it, left no successors. No manuals. No lineage. The knowledge simply vanished. Inscriptions on its panels suggest a familiarity with Babylonian cycles and Egyptian calendars. The builder wasn't just Greek, he was a collector of civilizations, merging East and West into an object of pure intellect. Its maker knew something others did not, that the heavens could be predicted, not prayed to. When researchers at the University of London used 3D X-ray tomography in 2005 to digitally unfold the corroded fragments, they discovered Greek text describing lunar phases, planetary motion, and possibly, lost gears never recovered from the wreck. The mechanism, they concluded, was even more complex than imagined. The surviving pieces were just part of a greater whole. One line in the text still haunts historians: the spiral begins again. Was it metaphor? Or instruction? Scholars still debate whether the Antikythera mechanism was unique or part of a forgotten tradition of ancient engineering. If it was singular, it represents the most astonishing leap of intellect in human history, a machine that thought, centuries before machines should have existed. If not, then it hints at something darker, a lineage of lost invention, extinguished by time or deliberate erasure. Perhaps, at some point, mankind learned to calculate the heavens, and then chose to forget how. The ocean gave us one gear, one glimpse, and swallowed the rest. The Curse of the Copper Scroll, a Dead Sea relic that lists vast treasures no one can find, and maybe no one was meant to. When archaeologists unsealed the caves of Qumran in 1952, they expected to find fragile papyrus fragments, like the other Dead Sea Scrolls. What they found instead was something impossibly heavy, a pair of copper plates, corroded and welded shut with age. Unlike the sacred writings around them, these weren't prayers or prophecies. They were instructions. Lists. Maps. And what they described would shake biblical archaeology to its core. Etched into the thin sheets in meticulous Hebrew script was a record of 64 hidden treasures, vast deposits of gold, silver, and ritual artifacts buried across ancient Judea. Each location was marked with cryptic directions: in the cistern under the steps, at the ruin in the valley of Acre, in the burial chamber, 40 cubits deep. The total wealth? By some estimates, hundreds of tons of gold, enough to rebuild a kingdom. But the copper scroll wasn't like the others. It wasn't written on parchment, meant for study. It was hammered into metal, as though the writer feared the knowledge might be lost or destroyed. Its Hebrew was peculiar, archaic, almost secretive, and no two scholars agreed on how to interpret it. Some thought it detailed temple treasures hidden before the Roman conquest. Others believed it was a coded inventory of sacred relics meant to reappear at the end of days. The mystery only deepened when researchers realized, none of the other Dead Sea Scrolls even mention it. It stood alone. A list with no context, no author, no theology, just the promise of unimaginable wealth. Over the decades, countless expeditions followed the directions. Archaeologists dug under ruined fortresses, desert wadis, caves, and ancient aqueducts. Not one found so much as a coin. It was as if the entire document had been written to mislead. Some suspected the Essenes, the ascetic sect believed to have lived at Qumran, created it as a decoy, a riddle to protect their sacred items from Roman looters. Others whispered something stranger, that it was never meant to be found at all. Because unlike other scrolls, the copper scroll ends abruptly. Its final lines are missing, torn, melted, or never completed. The last readable words, in the place of, then nothing, One theory suggests the scroll was intentionally unfinished, the last location kept unwritten so the treasure could never be fully uncovered. Another proposes a more chilling idea, that whoever wrote it died before finishing, perhaps punished for revealing what was meant to remain buried. In the 1960s, a fringe researcher named John Allegro, once part of the official translation team, claimed the scroll was metaphorical, a map of spiritual enlightenment rather than physical gold. He argued that the treasures were stages of mystical awakening. His peers dismissed him, but his claim lingered. What if the greatest treasure wasn't meant for the material world? Still, the question burns, if it was merely symbolic, why carve it into copper, the least perishable of metals? Why give specific measures and locations with such precision? Scholars still debate whether the copper scroll was a genuine inventory, a coded ritual, or an elaborate spiritual trap. Yet one detail stands uncontested: the writer wanted it to last forever. Even now, in Jordanian vaults, the two copper plates gleam faintly under museum light, green with age, defiant against time. The map to nowhere. A whisper of something hidden, and perhaps, thankfully, forgotten. For some mysteries guard not treasures, but the cost of finding them. The Voynich manuscript's living language, a book written in an unbreakable code that might not be human at all. It sits behind glass in Yale University's Beinecke Library, a small, unassuming book of roughly 240 pages, bound in faded calfskin. Its pages are covered with looping script and strange, delicate illustrations, plants that don't exist, celestial charts that defy astronomy, and naked women bathing in green liquid beneath floating stars. Its name is the Voynich manuscript, and it remains the most baffling document ever discovered. Written in an entirely unknown language, the manuscript first appeared in historical record in 1912, when a rare book dealer named Wilfred Voynich purchased it from a Jesuit collection in Italy. Even he couldn't decipher it, and neither could the generations of scholars, cryptographers, and codebreakers who followed. It has been studied by experts from MI5, the NSA, and even World War II code teams who cracked the Enigma machine. None succeeded. Every letter, every word follows a structure too precise to be gibberish. There's grammar, rhythm, syntax, but no known alphabet matches it. Linguists dubbed it Voynichese, an invented tongue that somehow behaves like a natural language. The mystery deepened when researchers ran computational analyses. The script carries linguistic entropy, meaning it mirrors how real languages distribute words. Someone didn't just doodle nonsense. They wrote something alive. The illustrations offer no relief. Some pages show impossible flora, flowers with blue roots and spiral stems, fruits shaped like stars. Others display cosmological diagrams, concentric circles intersecting like orbital systems, but not of our sky. There are naked women inside tubes, stars connected by arteries, and notes near each symbol that defy translation. The effect is dreamlike, as if a scientist from another world tried to describe it to us. For decades, theories have multiplied like shadows. Some say it's a lost alchemical manual, a coded guide to eternal life. Others call it a medical treatise for women's health, its odd drawings representing wombs, herbs, and celestial timing. A few whisper something more unsettling, that the manuscript was dictated, not written. A channeling. In the 1970s, a linguist named Gordon Rugg suggested it might be a hoax, an elaborate fake built with a medieval cipher grid. But that would have required mathematical knowledge unknown in the 1400s. Radiocarbon dating later confirmed the parchment's age, early 15th century. Centuries before Voynich's time, long before modern forgeries. If it's fake, it's the most perfect forgery in history. One fringe idea, half poetic, half terrifying, calls it the living book. They believe the manuscript's text may evolve with time, that its structure subtly changes depending on observation, an illusion of meaning that resists translation because it was never meant for us. Others claim it's the record of a non-human intelligence, a written interface between consciousnesses, explaining reality in symbols beyond our grasp. Even modern AI models trained on its patterns cannot replicate its logic fully. It behaves like language, but refuses to communicate. Scholars still debate whether it hides scientific wisdom, spiritual vision, or simply madness. Yet no one can deny its eerie allure. Each line, each curling letter, seems written by a steady hand that knew exactly what it was doing. The writer had purpose, even if we cannot see it. When you gaze into those pages, those impossible plants, that serene handwriting looping into nowhere, you feel a strange sense that meaning hovers just beyond reach, like a dream you almost remember. Perhaps that's the true secret of the Voynich manuscript. It's not that we can't read it. It's that it refuses to be read. And somewhere, in that refusal, lies the mind of whoever, or whatever, wrote it. The Ubaid lizard people, 7,000-year-old statues in Iraq depicting humanoid reptiles, older than myth itself. Long before Sumer, before Babylon and the great Mesopotamian empires, a quiet civilization flourished along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates. Archaeologists call them the Ubaid people, a name borrowed from the site of Tel al-Ubaid, near modern-day Ur in southern Iraq. They left no grand ziggurats, no written words, only tools, pottery, and a handful of figures carved from clay. But these figures are enough to unnerve anyone who looks at them. Because they do not look human. The Ubaid figurines, dated between 5,000 and 7,000 years old, depict beings with long, tapered skulls, slanted reptilian eyes, and smooth-scaled bodies. Many wear helmets or headdresses, suggesting rank or ritual, while others cradle infants in their arms, infants that share the same lizard-like features. They are not grotesque, they are serene, composed, purposeful. Whoever made them, meant to honor them. The mystery began in the early 1900s, when archaeologist Harry Reginald Hall excavated the site. Among domestic pottery and early temple relics, he found dozens of these statues buried in ceremonial layers. There was no myth or written context to explain them. Just the cold gaze of stone lizards watching from antiquity. Mainstream scholars have offered cautious theories. Perhaps they were depictions of gods, symbolic, not literal. Snakes and reptiles were common in Mesopotamian iconography, often associated with fertility, transformation, or the underworld. The figurines might represent priestesses wearing ritual masks, or totemic protectors tied to water and rebirth. But even within academia, the imagery unsettles. The level of consistency, same faces, same proportions, across different sites, suggests a shared archetype, not random art. And then come the fringe interpretations. Some claim the Ubaid figures represent a forgotten hybrid species, an ancient race that lived alongside early humans. Others tie them to Anunnaki legends, the serpent gods said to have descended from the stars to teach civilization. In these tales, the reptilian visage is no metaphor, it's literal ancestry. More grounded archaeologists dismiss such ideas as fantasy, yet one detail keeps the debate alive: the Ubaid period predates writing. No mythology, no story survives from them to clarify who these beings were meant to be. The lizard figures exist in total isolation, without context, without explanation. One sculpture, known as the Lizard Mother, shows a slender reptilian female nursing her child, its eyes narrow slits of calm indifference. The craftsmanship is delicate, almost tender. Whoever shaped it wasn't carving monsters. They were recording family. Scholars still debate whether these were early gods, symbols of transformation, or the remnants of pre-Sumerian legend lost to time. Some have even wondered if the Ubaid artisans saw something, someone, they couldn't forget. When we look at these statues today, in museum glass under clinical light, it's easy to rationalize them away: artistic invention, cultural symbolism, mythic metaphor. But deep in the human psyche, something stirs when we see them. The recognition of a form too close to ours to dismiss, and too alien to accept. Their narrow eyes seem to follow, even after you turn away. And perhaps that is their true message: the oldest gods didn't need to be worshipped. Only remembered. The tomb that eats light, a burial chamber in Egypt where torches die and compasses fail, dismissed yet feared by explorers. In the endless desert of Egypt, south of Cairo and far from the crowded tombs of the Valley of the Kings, there stands a lesser-known necropolis called Saqqara. Beneath its shifting sands lie hundreds of tombs, some royal, some humble, all forgotten. But among them, there's one spoken of in low voices by locals and dismissed with uneasy laughter by scholars. A tomb where light itself refuses to live. It was first recorded in the late 19th century by British explorer Richard Weiss, who had followed Bedouin guides to a partially collapsed shaft buried in dunes west of the Step Pyramid. He descended by rope with a lantern in hand. The deeper he went, the dimmer the flame became, not from lack of oil or air, but as if something unseen was swallowing the light whole. When he reached the floor, the walls were smooth as glass, yet the glow barely extended a hand's breadth from his lamp. He wrote, "The darkness here is not absence, but presence." No one has ever conclusively identified the tomb he described. Later expeditions couldn't find it again, as if the sands had reclaimed the entrance. But legends persisted, fueled by similar reports from later explorers, torches that refused to burn, compasses spinning wildly, voices echoing from nowhere. In the 1930s, Egyptian archaeologist Ahmed Fakhri documented an unmarked burial chamber near Saqqara with a similar phenomenon. Workers refused to enter after two men fainted inside, claiming the air was alive. Instruments recorded no toxins, no gases, just silence, and an inexplicable magnetic distortion. Their photographs came out pitch black, though taken in full light. Modern scientists would explain it as psychological panic, a reaction to claustrophobic darkness and poor air. Yet seasoned explorers who've encountered it insist otherwise, that inside, the dark behaves differently. It absorbs, not merely hides. Sound dulls, sight blurs, and orientation collapses. Even artificial lights, when used by a French team in 1984, flickered erratically and produced static interference on recording equipment. At the chamber's center, the explorers found something stranger still, a perfectly polished sarcophagus of black basalt, its lid sealed and seamless, as if carved from a single block. It was unmarked, undecorated, and radiated a faint static hum. The equipment failed entirely when placed upon it. When they tried to open it weeks later, the basalt cracked, revealing nothing. The interior was empty. Not even dust. Some historians proposed it was a cenotaph, a symbolic tomb built to honor no body but a concept, perhaps a deity of death or darkness. Others whispered of the Egyptian god Apep, embodiment of chaos and shadow, who devoured the sun each night before its rebirth. The tomb that eats light, they said, might have been a shrine to him. Or worse, a door. Scholars still debate whether the tomb ever existed or whether Weiss exaggerated his journals. Yet fragments of black basalt matching his description have surfaced in private collections, traced back to Saqqara's western edge. Their surfaces reflect no light at all, so matte that even under spotlights, they seem to drink illumination instead of returning it. The Bedouin who live nearby still avoid that region after dark. They call it Beit al-Anor, the house without light. They say the darkness there breathes. That if you bring a flame, the dark will take it, and remember your face. Perhaps it's only superstition, born of desert fear and old stories. But among Egyptologists, a peculiar phrase lingers, passed half-jokingly during digs: if your torch begins to fade, don't look up. Because some tombs guard not the dead, but the silence that death left behind. The stone spheres of Costa Rica, hundreds of perfect granite orbs scattered across the jungle, carved with no visible purpose or method. Deep in the southern jungles of Costa Rica, where vines coil over the earth like sleeping serpents and the rain falls as if the sky itself is melting, the ground is littered with something impossibly unnatural. Hundreds of enormous stone spheres, carved from solid granite, scattered across riverbeds, buried beneath trees, and aligned in strange geometric formations. Some are the size of a fist. Others, as large as cars. And each one is nearly perfect. First discovered in the 1930s by workers clearing banana plantations in the Dequis Delta, the spheres immediately caught the attention of archaeologists, and the imagination of everyone else. The laborers had dynamited several, thinking they contained treasure, only to find them completely solid, flawless to the core. Whoever shaped them didn't carve decoration or inscription. They created geometry itself, and then walked away. Dating techniques link the spheres to the Dequis culture, flourishing between 600 and 1000 CE. But how this pre-Columbian society achieved such precision remains a riddle. The nearest quarry lies miles away, across rivers and dense forest, and granite this hard requires advanced tools to shape. Even with modern equipment, carving perfect spheres from solid rock without splitting them would be a monumental task. So, how did they do it? Mainstream archaeologists suggest the Dequis used repeated heating and cooling to fracture stone, combined with sand polishing. But this still doesn't explain the mathematical symmetry. Many are accurate to within a few millimeters. They weren't merely decorative, they were engineered. Then comes the bigger question, why? Theories range wildly. Some believe the spheres aligned with constellations or solar movements, marking seasons or celestial events. Others claim they were territorial markers, each sphere representing a clan or family. A few indigenous legends say the stones were weapons of the gods, the thunderballs of Terra, hurled to drive away demons. But none of these explanations fit every arrangement. Some spheres form straight lines, others cluster in precise triangles or arcs that only make sense from above. When American archaeologist Samuel Lothrop studied them in the 1940s, he mapped several sites where the spheres formed perfect geometric grids, oriented toward magnetic north. Yet no compass existed for the Dequis people. Scholars still debate whether these alignments were coincidence, or evidence of astronomical intent. Then there's the oddest mystery of all, the movement. The spheres appear in places they shouldn't, some deep in forest, others half buried on hillsides far from any recorded settlement. Excavations suggest they were deliberately transported there long after carving. But to what end? Were they offerings? Guardians? Cosmic markers for something we've forgotten? By the 1970s, farmers began removing them, rolling them away as lawn ornaments or shipping them to foreign collections. In time, many were lost, cracked, or stolen. Those that remained still seem to hum faintly when struck, resonating like tuning bowls. Some even align perfectly with sunrise during equinoxes, though whether that's design or chance remains unclear. When UNESCO declared the stone spheres a World Heritage Site in 2014, researchers hoped new technology might solve the mystery. Ground scans revealed buried clusters still untouched, but no tools, no blueprints, no workshops. Just spheres. Dozens. Hundreds. Silent and waiting. Scholars still debate whether the Dequis stones were ritual, practical, or purely symbolic. But one fact refuses to erode: their creators sought perfection. They shaped something eternal out of an unforgiving world, round as the heavens themselves. Today, the jungle creeps back around them. Moss softens their edges. Yet they remain, silent witnesses from a civilization that needed no words, no inscriptions, no faces. Only form. Perhaps that was the point all along. Perfection is its own language. And these spheres still speak it. The Nazca lines from the sky, vast desert drawings meant to be seen from above, built by a people who couldn't fly. Stretching across the scorched plains of southern Peru, where the earth itself seems to whisper ancient names, lies one of humanity's strangest achievements, the Nazca lines. Enormous geoglyphs carved into the desert surface, monkeys, hummingbirds, spiders, spirals, and perfectly straight lines that run for miles. Created over 2,000 years ago, their scale is so vast that from ground level, they're nearly invisible. Only from the sky can their full design be seen. Yet the Nazca had no way to fly. The first Europeans to stumble upon them, in the 16th century, dismissed them as meaningless paths or irrigation channels. It wasn't until 1939, when American archaeologist Paul Kosok flew over the desert in a small plane, that the full scope emerged. Looking down, he gasped. It was as if the ground had been carved with a giant ruler. From above, the barren expanse revealed colossal patterns, animals, humanoid shapes, intersecting lines stretching perfectly straight across mountains and valleys. Some spanned more than 10 miles. To this day, no one truly knows why. The mainstream view is that the Nazca people, a civilization thriving between 200 BCE and 600 CE, made them as ritual offerings to the gods, visible from the heavens. The dry desert wind and lack of rain preserved their precision. Each line was made by removing the top layer of dark iron oxide pebbles, exposing the lighter soil beneath. But the perfection of the lines, drawn without aerial view or modern surveying tools, is nothing short of supernatural. Some align with solstices and star paths, others seem random. Geologists confirm they were planned with complex geometry, right angles, spiral symmetry, and consistent width over uneven terrain. How could artisans working from ground level maintain such perfect scale? Some suggest they used simple surveying tools, stakes and ropes, to map designs over weeks or months. Yet even those reconstructions can't match the precision of the originals. And then there are the runways, massive straight lines, flattened for miles, cutting through desert ridges. When early pilots saw them, they joked they were landing strips for ancient astronauts. Fringe theorists like Erich von Däniken later popularized that very idea in Chariots of the Gods, claiming the Nazca lines were messages, or navigation guides, for visitors from the stars. Archaeologists dismissed the theory as fantasy, but it remains one of the most persistent images in popular imagination, a primitive people, carving signals in the sand for eyes that watched from above. In truth, the Nazca may have been communicating with the heavens in another way. Researcher Maria Reich, who devoted her life to mapping and preserving the lines, proposed they formed an enormous astronomical calendar. The figures, she believed, represented constellations, and their intersections marked celestial events. Yet when computer models were applied, most alignments failed to match known star charts. Some did, but faintly, too faintly to be definitive. So the enigma persists. Ritual? Astronomy? Alien calligraphy? Or something else entirely? Modern archaeologists have discovered nearby ceremonial platforms, from which priests may have observed processions following the lines during rituals to call for rain in the arid Nazca desert. The shapes might have been sacred pathways, not messages to the sky, but journeys walked upon the earth, an inverted prayer seen by the gods above. Scholars still debate whether the Nazca lines were offerings to celestial deities, complex calendars, or pure expressions of devotion. No human bones or tools mark their edges, no clear myth explains them. Only emptiness and precision remain. From the sky, the figures stretch across the sand like memories too large for a single lifetime. They have survived empire, invasion, and centuries of wind. Yet they remain silent, perfectly drawn, perfectly meaningless, until someone remembers to look from above. Perhaps that was the point. To speak not to us, but to something that always watched. The shining faces of Mount Kailash, a sacred mountain untouched by climbers, reflecting light like a mirror and guarding something unseen. High in the remote wilderness of western Tibet stands Mount Kailash, a perfectly symmetrical pyramid of black rock and snow, its summit gleaming like polished glass beneath the thin Himalayan sun. It rises alone, unclimbed, unscarred, and worshipped by four of the world's great religions. Hindus see it as the home of Lord Shiva. Buddhists call it the axis of the world, the navel of the universe. Jains and Bon followers revere it as the stairway to liberation. Yet no one has ever reached its peak. And those who tried, never came back unchanged. The mountain's symmetry is uncanny. From every angle, it appears mathematically perfect, its sides aligned with the cardinal directions, its ridges forming near right angles. When the sun rises or sets, its faces catch light in such a way that they shimmer, almost glow, like a mirror reflecting something otherworldly. Locals say it is not rock but stone frozen by the gods, and that to approach it without purity is to invite madness. For centuries, climbers have been forbidden to scale it. Even when British expeditions reached the area in the 20th century, they were turned away, not by the Tibetan government, but by local monks who claimed the mountain itself must not be defiled. In 2001, when a team of Spanish mountaineers sought a permit, the Dalai Lama himself requested they abandon their plan. They did. Certain places, he said softly, are meant to be seen, not touched. The earliest accounts of Kailash's mystery go back to ancient Sanskrit texts describing it as Mount Meru, the cosmic pillar connecting earth to heaven. The river systems that feed half of Asia, the Indus, Sutlej, Brahmaputra, and Karnali, all originate near its base, as if life itself flows from this sacred geometry. Pilgrims who walk its 52-kilometer circuit, the Kora, say time bends there. Some complete the trek in half the usual duration. Others claim that while circling, stars seem to move too fast, as though the sky itself spins differently around the mountain. Soviet geologists who studied Kailash in the 1980s were equally perplexed. The mountain's summit features horizontal striations that look artificial, like cut terraces, leading some to speculate it's not a natural formation at all but a colossal, ancient pyramid, possibly the largest ever built. Satellite imagery shows its slopes intersecting with uncanny regularity, forming patterns unseen in other Himalayan peaks. Yet when samples were analyzed, the rock was found to be millions of years old, far older than any civilization. Still, stories persist. In 1999, 2 Russian climbers allegedly attempted to ascend Kailash despite prohibitions. Halfway up, they radioed base camp, describing strange electrical interference and the feeling that the air was buzzing. Then silence. When rescuers found their bodies days later, they were inexplicably aged, as though decades had passed. Official reports called it exposure. Locals called it punishment. Scientists dismiss such tales, of course. They say the mountain's mirror effect is due to sunlight reflecting off mica-rich schist. The temporal distortions, they claim, are the effects of altitude and exhaustion. But for those who've walked beneath its shadow, the rational explanations fade like breath in cold air. Scholars still debate whether Mount Kailash's reverence stems from coincidence, its symmetry, its geography, or something far deeper. Every faith that gazes upon it describes it the same way, alive. A mountain that watches, that waits, that glows when the world darkens. No human has ever stood on its summit, and perhaps none ever will. Because the people who live beneath Kailash believe it isn't just sacred. It's sentient. They say when the world forgets its balance, the shining faces of the mountain will open, and light will pour out once more, not to blind, but to remind. Until then, it stands in silence, gleaming against the stars, a monument to everything mankind cannot explain, and perhaps should not. Conclusion. From the whispering stones of Chichen Itza to the forbidden glow of Mount Kailash, humanity's oldest mysteries share one quiet truth: they resist us. Each riddle, carved in bone or rock or air, stands as a mirror to our own longing to know. The ancients built monuments not just for gods, but for questions. And though we have mapped the stars, measured the atoms, and conquered the heights, the shadows of our beginnings remain. Maybe these enigmas endure because they remind us of what we've lost: reverence, imagination, wonder. They whisper that the world was never meant to be fully understood, that mystery itself is sacred. So the echoes linger, the mummies scream, the machines tick, and the mountains gleam. And across the ages, one message remains clear: we were never the first to look at the unknown, only the latest to listen.